And welcome to another edition of the AA team here on the Barroom Network. I'm Ken Fang along with Stephen Negishi. And if you weren't with us a couple of weeks ago, we had an announcement that now we're going to be a 1-hour show. And we have White Sox talk coming up right after us as well. So we look forward to that. And we look forward to having a shorter show for the baseball season throughout the next few months. Stephen, nice to be on with you. We have a lot of things to talk about.
Yes, sir. Like Ken said, there will be White Sox talk after this show. So, with the baseball starting this week, finally, after the long delayed work stoppage that possibly derailed the baseball season, hopefully the back-to-back shows will keep us entertained for throughout the baseball season.
Yes, absolutely. And well, with the fact that we have a shorter show, let's get right to our. First of all, let's talk about the guests who we're going to have. Stephen, who are we going to have on tonight?
Well, since the April is also the end of draft, which is in a few weeks, and this is the Bears centric show, the Bears centric network. We have Usayd Koshul, who is the Bears report on 24/7 Sport, and RIshab Skiri, who is the Bears YouTuber that many Bears fans are probably familiar with, the Windy City production. So we're looking forward to having both of them to talk about the Bears offseason as well as the crazy NFL offseason. And, Ken, we didn't talk about this last week. You being a Browns fan, we'll talk about the controversial, Deshaun Watson trade and how you really feel about, the whole trade being played down as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've got a lot of things to say about that, but let's first get on to our first segment, which we talk about things in the news, and we first talk about on the latest on the Ricketts family efforts to buy Chelsea in the English Premier League. Of course, their owner, a Russian oligarch, Roman Abramovich, has basically been sanctioned in the UK, so he can no longer operate Chelsea, and Chelsea was basically put into a state of flux as they didn't have any money to almost didn't have enough money to pay their players, almost got locked out of their practice facility. A lot of things happened. The Ricketts right now trying to purchase the Chelsea. Another owner in sports, an American sports owner, Woody Johnson from the New York Jets, was also named as a potential owner. However, he was eliminated early. But the Ricketts are hoping to purchase Chelsea. They are still in the mix. Stephen, let's talk about Roman Abramovich. Who is he, and what's going on? Some interesting news that has happened with him over the last week. But let's first talk about who is Roman Abramovich.
Well, he's a Russian oligarch, as you mentioned. I believe last week there was a report that he was actually poisoned and temporarily got blinded, which is not a surprising stuff, because if you follow the world news closely, anybody who is considered getting in the crosshairs of Vladimir Putin has been either killed or poisoned to death. Even in London, where I believe one of the double agents were killed by nuclear cyanide or something like that. So it
Yes.
is surprisingly crazy. Roman Abramovich is basically a guy who is what some say he's basically the reason why Vladimir Putin has been able to maintain power all these years. Now, the tweet that you're seeing right now, this is actually a very, very long tweet. So if you have a Twitter account, I strongly suggest follow this lady Maria. I don't want to mispronounce her last name. There's about like a 20 statements on why or who Roman Abramovich is. She mentioned the elephant in the negotiation room. I mentioned last week, the last show, that Roman Abramovich is actually a key figure in the negotiation between Russia and Ukraine right now to halt the war. And then, ironically, he ended up almost getting himself killed. It's almost you can't write a weirder script than this one, considering his mother's Ukrainian, and he has been in London. He bought the Chelsea back in 2003 and spent like $1 billion of money in player transfer and won many, many trophies.
Yeah.
And he has $1.5 billion in loan that he's also agreed to waive off before the UK government took over and sanctioned him. So if you want to know more about, Roman Abramovich, I strongly, recommend following her story and get to know more about this man.
Yes.
And there was also a 60-minute piece yesterday on CBS last night about the UK government having a hard time trying to keep away Russian oligarchs, people like Abramovich, who have made their, money and who have made their, wielded their influence for a long, long time. So I strongly suggest looking into that if you have like a CBS or Paramount Plus account as well there.
And interesting that you did mention the fact that, and as a Chelsea fan, before all this came about, Abramovich was well liked by Chelsea fans for the fact that he was willing to spend money, and he's managed to bring Chelsea several English Premier League championships. That before that time, Chelsea was actually in a state of flux like they are in currently, financially, and also on the bottom of the Premier League, in danger of being relegated a couple of times. But now, of course, last year they won the Champions League, and they are in the top tier of the Premier League right now, even despite all the things that have been happening with their current financial situation. But let's talk about the Ricketts right now and their involvement throughout this whole thing. As we mentioned, they're in the mix to buy Chelsea. What's the latest on what you're hearing, Stephen?
Well, there was an article over on goal.com, which is a very popular soccer website. Their bids have been met with a lot of criticism and backlash because Tom Ricketts' father, Joe Ricketts, who has made some snide comments regarding some anti-Muslim backlash, which drew a huge rebuke from the fans and the current Chelsea coach, Thomas Tuchel, who I believe was quoted as saying there has to be some sort of a consequences that needs to be met with the comments like that. So, and then Chelsea, over the weekend, they lost to a team called, I believe, Brentford, that was in the relegation zone. They look so putrid. I watched the second half of the game on USA. 4-1. They lost to a team that was in a relegation battle.
And no business losing on it. Yeah.
No. They had no business losing. So on and off the field, Chelsea took a huge loss there. And there was actually a protest outside the Stamford Bridge where Chelsea plays. There were some fans out there chanting, hurling insults toward the Ricketts.
leave it
there
to
was
the English
a
to have
slight,
some very original chants.
F-bomb there.
They come up with a lot of stuff. The English and the Scottish are known for their insults,
Yes.
and the Ricketts are very not very well liked right now. And I know as fans and reading up on a lot of message boards on Chelsea message boards, the fans really don't want them to be purchased by the Ricketts, but of course it's not up to the fans, of course. If we're up, of course, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. But what is also the view from inside Chicago?
So it's interesting. There was a couple of articles I was able to pull out. Chelsea has a huge following here in the United States, and there was actually a Sky Sports News piece about one of the Chicago chapter members who spoke out on this that I think I wanted to show to you guys. Although, if you don't mind
The
playing that
Ricketts
clip.
family are flying to London as part of their bid to buy Chelsea. They're still waiting to find out if they've made it onto the shortlist of preferred bidders. Well, they're coming to meet key stakeholders, which include the Chelsea Supporters Trust and the Chelsea pitch owners. Now, this development comes after Tom Rickett spoke on the phone yesterday to Greg Hands, the Conservative MP for Chelsea. The Ricketts family are members of owners of the Major League Baseball team, the Chicago Cubs, and their bid is backed by billionaire US hedge fund manager Ken Griffin. But there's opposition.
Yeah,
So,
Oh,
sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Stephen. Go ahead, Stephen. Sorry.
Okay, so already right now, that was before they were in the bidding, and now they're. I believe I read over the weekend. Now they are one of the finalists for the the groups to buy Chelsea as of right now. But here in Chicago, myself being a Cubs fan, and a lot of us on the Barroom Network, we follow the Cubs closely, with the baseball just around the corner. And we have not been very, very happy with the Ricketts level of commitment when it comes to putting quality contenders. It's been far too long since the Cubs were relevant. Them winning the World Series 6 years ago seems like yesterday. It seems like yesterday already.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of it's really weird why all of a sudden they want to buy Chelsea. I forgot to mention in the last show, there are several American owners who are involved in the EPL, English Premier League. The Glazers who own the Buccaneers.
And John Henry owns Liverpool,
That is correct.
John Henry also owns the Boston Globe and the Boston Red Sox as well. And ever since he purchased Liverpool and the Red Sox fans wonder where his commitment really is. Is it really to Liverpool? Is it really to Boston? If the Ricketts purchase the Chelsea football team or football club, that will also be a question amongst Cubs fans and Chelsea fans alike, where is their real commitment going to be?
That's right. And I forgot to mention the Stan Kroenke, who owns the Rams and Arsenal, who got their butt kicked today.
Yes.
3-0 to Crystal Palace.
Yes,
so,
Crystal Palace. Yes.
Right. And the Arsenal fans have been very, very angry towards the Kroenkes as well. So if the Ricketts are, worried about the fans' backlash, the Cubs fans like myself, as you saw on the earlier video about, small fans, chanting "F off Ricketts, you're not wanted here." You can imagine the field day that the British media tabloids are going to have. That will pale in comparison to what the Ricketts are facing with the angry Chicago Cubs fans. There was even Rick Morrissey, who wrote a skating article, the columnist with the Chicago Sun-Times, about the Ricketts not being able to escape his father, Joe's anti-Muslim views. This is actually kind of weird because, the Ricketts used Joe's money to buy the Cubs to finance the Wrigley Field renovation. He has a sister who is a lesbian and a campaign for LGBTQ, community.
Right.
So it's a weird dynamic that the Ricketts are, involved in right now, trying to make the Cubs relevant again, be more competitive. And then you have a father who's a bigoted anti-Muslim, and then a place like London, with Chelsea, where you have players who are Muslims like Ngaku and Ziyech. Very very strong communities. In the Muslim communities in London and also all over Europe who are big soccer fans. This is not going to go well, and it's interesting to see how the Ricketts navigate themselves. The baseball around the corner, and if the Cubs tank, then the fans are just going to pretty much throw in the towel. So
Yeah, and also in Manchester, where the fans are used to success, especially for Manchester United, the Glazers have come under attack because of the lack of success that Manchester United has had over the last few years, especially as they have not been on top of the table like they normally are. And at least for me as a Chelsea fan, that's fine with me. They can be off the top of the table. But certainly I can understand where the fans' anger are coming from at the Glazers, especially when they have success at Tampa Bay and not doing very well. With doing well with the Buccaneers, but not doing very well with the Red Devils. We also have to talk about this past weekend, the NCAA Final Four, of course, coming up tonight will be the NCAA National Championship game between North Carolina and Kansas, but a great game on Saturday night between North Carolina and Duke. Believe it or not, for their century-long rivalry, it was the first time the two teams had ever met in the NCAA tournament, considering how many times they've met through the regular season and the ACC tournament. They've never met in the NCAA tournament, and what a game it was. Really a fantastic game, one of the best college basketball games I've ever seen. Both teams going back and forth, and North Carolina finally winning. At least I'm very happy about that, not being a Duke fan. But let's talk a little bit about Coach Mike Krzyzewski's legacy, especially what's interesting, a little full circle. His first regular season loss came to North Carolina. His last regular season loss came to North Carolina as he was trying to say goodbye to Cameron Indoor Stadium, and his last ever loss came to North Carolina. So it's a very interesting full circle there. But Stephen, throughout in between that time when he had his very first loss and his very last loss, and you can see the fans crying at Cameron Indoor Stadium at the very last game back in March. Stephen, let's talk a little bit about Coach K's legacy. I mean, even despite the fact that many North Carolina fans are very happily calling him Coach L after the game on Saturday, you have to see the great success that he's had with going to 13 Final Fours, which is now the standard, the record. He is now one over Coach John Wooden at UCLA, and so many national championships. And his last one, I think, it was in 2015 or 2018. But really fantastic record.
Oh, without a doubt, I don't think Coach K's legacy isn't tarnished by any stretch of the imagination. He coached Team USA in Olympics, won gold medal. His ability to interact with the pros was just incredible. Winning 2 gold medals 2012 and 2016. The ability to coach the young players at a college level, and then do it against the in the international game, coaching the millionaire pro athletes it's incredible. What he did at Duke, as much as we hate Duke and the program's tremendous success under him. You can't deny that. And obviously, he probably won't be able to sleep having lost to North Carolina in such fashion regular season and then on Saturday. But, he'll definitely go into Hall of Fame, if not already. But, the Duke has a huge, shoe to fill. John Shire, the longtime assistant and a former player, obviously, he knows Coach K.
Yep.
Yeah, Coach K's system, Coach K's culture. It will be interesting to see, because you got a lot of players right now on that team who are probably going to leave, one and dones, Paulo Banchero and guys like that, who will probably leave and become a first round picks. Um, you know, it will be interesting to see if he can keep any of them and if any of the recruits who are coming in next year can continue their success.
Absolutely. And like we said, an interesting piece of trivia. He almost became the coach of the Boston Celtics back in the 1990s. They gave him a very hard offer. He eventually did turn it down, and eventually the Celtics hired Rick Pitino instead. But he was very close to becoming the Boston Celtics coach. So imagine what could have happened had he decided to go to the NBA back in the 90s rather than stay. Would Duke have been so successful after his departure? Probably not, but still, we'll never know. And Duke's his legacy is very solid as he retires and leaves coaching in 2022. Of course, we wouldn't be remiss. Everyone's talked about it. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about it. What happened not this past Sunday, but 2 Sundays ago? The slap heard around the world. Will Smith slapping Chris Rock on stage at the Oscars after Will Smith heard the joke from Chris Rock in regards to his wife's bald head. Jada Pinkett
Alopecia, right? I think.
Yeah, she said that he said made a joke about I can't wait to see G.I. Jane 2, not realizing that Jada Pinkett Smith has alopecia, which causes her hair to fall out, and she looks actually very beautiful as quite bald.
Even
But still,
yes.
he did not. I don't think he realized the joke. He didn't realize it. He said if he realized, had that been the case, had he realized that ahead of time, he would not have made that joke. But still, a lot of repercussions around it. Let's talk a little bit about that, Stephen, before we go to break. Your thoughts?
It's a tough one. I spoke with a black colleague of mine the day after. He's an older guy. He's probably retiring in a couple of years. He made that clear, and he said it makes us look real bad, and that really stuck me. As a minority myself too. The fallout has been pretty strong. Smith resigned from the academy. I think a lot of his work is kind of put on hold right now because nobody wants to do anything with him.
Yeah.
And I jokingly said somewhere that at some point maybe these two, who had a very I don't want to call it a weird relationship dynamics. At one point, do you say both Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith decide to call it off? I know there are people saying that she's strong enough of a woman to protect herself, and I do agree with that, but yeah, the repercussion and the image will reverberate for a long time, and it's a very difficult one, for me to comment and really kind of really digest, because I can see both sides to it, and I know that's seem like a cop out to some degree, but I don't know if Will Smith did the right thing by slapping, and it's a constant reminder for us to maintain our dignity, but also maintain our poise and composure, no matter what.
I will say this: a lot of comedians were very fearful because they have, of course, their whole career is made on very cutting comments and insults, and of course, being protected, or not necessarily being protected, but not having someone come up the stage and come up onto the stage from the crowd and slap them. Many were fearful that this may open up a can of worms, but let's certainly hope not. and we'll certainly see the repercussions of this throughout the year and in the weeks and the months coming ahead. Coming up, we're going to be talking about the Bears, and they're coming up on the draft. We have a lot of things to discuss. We have a couple of guests coming up, and we can get to break, and we'll be right back after these messages on the Barroom Network.
The past year has seen a 1,900% rise in anti-Asian hate crime in New York City alone, with 2,800 incidents reported across 47 states and Washington, D.C. This is a national crisis, and we need your help to call it out. Call it a crime. Call it what it is: racism. Let's stand up together against hate. Learn more at stopaapihate.org.
Back once again, back once again, back once again, back once again, back once again with a beat. Let the bass kick. Let's go. Back once again, back once again, back once again with a back once again with a beat. Let the bass kick.
We are back on the Barroom Network, and let's talk. Let's see what we have right now for our guests upcoming. We're supposed to have a couple of guests, but I think we have one on the line right now. So why don't we at least bring one person in? It's RIshab Skiri of the Windy Productions. Skiri and RIshab, nice to have you joining us. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good, man. You guys have a nice show. I was listening in and got some good topics to talk about, obviously. So
Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure.
Usayd is we're working on him. He just contacted me, and we're working on to have him join in shortly. But Aldo, if you don't mind pulling up the article that you sent to us regarding the Variety article, speaking of the Academy Awards. There was an interesting, development that day, other than the slap heard around the world. I'm sure you might be familiar, with the, this is where it all happened. The Summer of Soul that was that won the what was this?
Best documentary award.
This was the documentary, right?
Yeah, best documentary. It's playing on Hulu, Summer of Soul, which is about what they call the Black Woodstock. It was played during the 1960s. It was in Harlem. It's great footage, and not many people really knew about this until Questlove put this documentary on, and it was on Hulu. So there was a joke that Chris Rock made out as he was trying to recover from the slap, and basically saying that they're basically four white guys coming up on stage. But that was not, it wasn't necessarily the best of jokes. Chris Rock wasn't having the best of moments after making a joke about alopecia, and then four white guys. And then, as you can see, the producer, Joseph Patel, wrote an article, basically did an interview with Variety, basically calling Chris Rock an effing dick for calling him a white guy. So it was quite interesting, and the reaction, of course, by Joseph Patel is justified. I have to say, even though Chris Rock was probably trying to recover from that situation, trying to still make jokes, but still, it still wasn't the best of moments for the Oscars at that time.
Yeah, obviously. I think this was a kind of ad lib, right?
It was basically a written ad lib. According, I think Aldo and we were talking about this before we come on, and Aldo said that basically, in rehearsals, he still made that joke.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
obviously, the reason why Ken and I started this show was obviously to bring more AAPI people, into give them more attention and give them the spotlight. Obviously, RIshab and Usayd obviously is very well known within the Bears community. Rishab, while we wait for Usayd, what are your thoughts on things like this when Chris Rock, obviously he's garnered a lot of sympathy or for happy, and then praise for taking it like a man for getting hit, but obviously making some off comments such as this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a tough situation because when I saw this whole thing 2 weeks, was it 2 weeks ago, or maybe it was
No,
last
that was like
week?
more like a week or so ago.
Yeah, it was like last weekend. I was like, in some ways, I was like, this is the best thing to possibly happen to the Oscars, right? Because nobody was talking about the Oscars, nobody really cared about it as much, and everybody is talking about it now. So in some ways, I mean, I'm sure the people at the Oscars are like kind of happy that this happened because any publicity is good publicity in some cases, right? But like you mentioned,
Exactly.
for Chris Rock, for the various people involved, for Will Smith, obviously not something you want to have associated with you, right? Especially for Will Smith. I mean, he's been a professional his entire career, and that was, I think we'd all agree that was like a weak point for him, even though, Chris Rock did say something that was like personally offensive to him, but violence should probably never be the answer. So
Right.
I don't really have too many opinions on it other than I thought it was pretty funny. And like, I don't think, Will Smith should be canceled from everything, right? Like they're kind of stopping him from going to, I don't know, like he resigned from the academy and all that. I don't really know how movie stuff works, but I think the reaction has been a little bit over the top, but that's just my opinion.
Right. Well, I mean, Louis C.K. won the Grammy yesterday for Best Comedy. So anybody who says, or whether it's him or anybody who's defending him and cancel culture, I think they can at least put that to bed aside for a moment. All right. So our other guest tonight, Usayd Koshul. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty. Usayd, is that a correct pronunciation?
It's actually Usayd, guys.
Usayd Koshul?
Yes.
All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us, Usayd. Let's get to the topic that we wanted to discuss about, this being a, the Bears network. Both of you guys have gotten a lot of attention from the Bears fans like myself for being a Bears expert and a Bears YouTuber, Rishab. Where do you stand on this offseason? I know a lot of people are very, very impatient so far with what Ryan Poles have done. Obviously, I'm one of the people, but the level of damage that was inflicted by Ryan Pace paying, veterans like Jimmy Graham and Robert Quinn such a ridiculous amount of money. At least Robert Quinn produced this past year, but there's significant amount of cleaning up to do with the the salary cap and everything. Where do you stand on what the Bears have done so far under Ryan Poles? Go ahead. Sorry.
You can go ahead.
I mean, yeah, I'll take this one first. There's a sense of urgency, I think, that exists because for the first time in forever, the Bears have a highly priced quarterback. I mean, I don't remember a Bears team in my lifetime outside of, I want to say, the 2018 team, and then one or two times throughout the Jay Cutler era where everyone was like, hey, the Bears have kind of brought in this quarterback. We feel like the Bears have finally found the one. And so when you just talk about windows in the NFL and how fast they open up, how fast they close much faster than they open up. There's a reason that Bears fans are just like, hey, attack it, get it out there. But I also think that people have to kind of take a step back and understand this whole aspect too, is that whenever a new regime comes in, the first year is typically always spent kind of just going ahead and cleaning up whatever garbage was left behind by the previous regime. And, I looked at the way Ryan Poles operated in free agency this off season. And I looked at the way that Ryan Pace operated in free agency his first season when he got here. It's not very different, the approach both took. I mean, both were incredibly patient. If people remember that first offseason, Ryan Poles was bringing in some of these low-risk, high-reward type veterans such as an Antrell Roll and Eddie Royal. And I liken that to what Ryan Poles is doing right now because he's also bringing in these low-risk, high-reward players who have been productive in other situations. And right now you're just trying to find a diamond in the rough. But people also have to understand this final aspect too that I'll hit on is that for the Bears right now, the Bears are at a point, this team's at a point where some of these players that the Bears are bringing in are not going to be long-term building blocks. The long-term building blocks are going to come through the NFL draft. Half this roster that we're looking at right now is, and it all starts with the Khalil Mack trade too, is like Ryan Poles recognized that, look, 90 to 95% of this roster is not going to be around in 3 to 4 years anyway. And so him kind of playing this long-term approach, it sucks right now, but I always tell people this, and I've been saying this for 2 years now when it became very apparent going into the 2020 season, the Bears were going to need another quarterback, is that when you draft an NFL quarterback, it's kind of like buying a house, right? You're not making this 2, 3, 4 year investment. You're investing in something for, 15, 20, 25 plus years, whatever the case may be, right? So the point is that it sucks right now, but you know what? 2 to 3 years of kind of taking it slow and just building through the draft is basically all about 15 to 20 years of dominance for the Bears with Justin Fields.
RIshab, what are your thoughts on the what Usayd has touched on the Poles off-season moves so far?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what he said. And, like Ryan Poles said in his opening press conference, he wants to build this thing through the draft. He doesn't want to overpay free agents his first year. He doesn't want to trade all of his draft capital for like a DK Metcalf or for like a Tyreek Hill. He wants to build this slowly through the draft, which I feel like is the right thing to do. And also, you talked about getting those second, third wave of free agency guys, which we haven't signed too many free agents at this point in time, but there's still a lot of them out there. So I get that Bears fans have been kind of impatient because, like Usayd said, like we have a very talented quarterback now in Justin Fields, and we probably never had a quarterback this talented. So people want to see us, build around this quarterback while he's still on his rookie deal, which is going to be pretty important, right? Because we don't have to pay him very much money at all for, 3 more years, right? So I do agree that building it slowly through the draft is, the right way to go. But I also would, if there's anything I would criticize Ryan Poles on, I still wish he got maybe more proven things on the offensive line, because if there's any part of the team that I feel like has to be, solid for Justin Fields, it will be the offensive line. So maybe that's one area where he could have been a little bit better, maybe a little bit more aggressive. But at the same time, we didn't have that much money at all to spend this year, guys. Like obviously next year we have crazy amount of money. We have like over $120 million or something like that. But this offseason, we only had like 30 million, something like that. And we had to, redo the entire team pretty much, like everybody left. So I get that Bears fans are impatient. A lot of people are already turning on Ryan Poles, which I think that's absolutely crazy. He's only been here for 3 months, not even 3 months, like 2 months, hasn't had his first NFL draft. So I think that after the draft, the Bears fans might be feeling a little bit better, because I'm assuming we will have gotten, a receiver, offensive lineman, maybe some more guys. So we'll see. But Bears fans do have to be patient.
Mm-hmm. Well, the draft only about a couple of weeks away. With the 6 picks right now, I expect the Bears to do some, trading down, just to garner picks. I know people will be, like, don't trade picks just for the sake of making one. But where do you see Ryan Poles with the upcoming draft? Who are the players that you guys think that there would be a pretty good fit for the Bears? Let's start with you, Usayd. Sorry about that. Let's start with you, Usayd.
Yeah, so when you look at this NFL draft, it's interesting because a lot of times quarterbacks kind of dictate just the way that the draft board falls. But this year it's real different because you have a really good cornerback class, a really good wide receiver class, 2 positions that have basically become premium in a league that's just driven by elite wide receiver play, elite quarterback play, and elite offensive play. And so ultimately, when you look at that, you have a couple blue chip prospects, Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau. I think that's going to start pushing players down the board that the Bears are going to keep an eye on. One name that I've been very high on since the pre-draft process started back in January, Zion Johnson from Boston College. I really think that Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham, they have connections in the ACC. So Zion Johnson's a name to keep an eye on. You look at that second round. The Bears having 2 second-round picks, and this is kind of a blessing in disguise from the Khalil Mack trade, because you're looking at, I think, an offensive lineman and a wide receiver, right? You look at all the good teams in the NFL. The common theme with them is they draft and develop both of those positions extremely well. And so for wide receiver, you're looking at, I don't think a guy like a Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson's going to be there for the Bears. Christian Watson's a name that I like to think is much hotter in league circles than Bears fans expect. So I don't think he's going to be there at 39, just because you don't find a 6'3", 6'4" wide receiver that's that good of an athlete and that good of a physical specimen like
Sure.
Christian Watson. I mean, those guys are some rare commodities. But again, DK Metcalf slipped a couple of years ago, and everyone for sure thought he was the number one wide receiver in that 2019 class. But other names to keep an eye on. I like Traylon Burks from Arkansas. I think David Bell, being a possession receiver that he is, he's a name to keep an eye on. And then if you throw a wild card in there, I would have to say that cornerback is a position where it's interesting because knowing Matt Eberflus and the Bears defensive staff's track record of drafting and developing defensive backs, I think that they could certainly try to get the most out of Jalen Johnson and Thomas Graham Jr. But I also would not surprise me to see them draft a cornerback in the second round and just get, that position shored up for the future.
Rishab, the receivers and the corners are two top needs at the moment right now, along with the offensive line. Is there any other need that the Bears really need to start addressing before the start of the season? Any particular players you have in mind on the upcoming draft?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of needs on our entire team, right? Because if you look at a roster right now, there's not really many areas where you feel like we have set sure things. Like receiver obviously has big holes. Offensive line has maybe big holes. Tight end. Cole Kmet is still pretty young, but like, do we have another tight end along with him? We only have Jesper Horsted signed on the roster right now. So tight end could also be a need. Running back is like the only area where I feel like we're totally fine right now. Like we are obviously on Monty, Khalil Herbert, probably one of the best running back duos in the entire NFL. So, offense does have a lot of needs. And like Usayd said, like receiver and offensive line should be probably the biggest priority for the Bears this year because you want to see what Justin Fields can be, right? And if you don't surround him with any sort of talent, you're not going to see anything close to what he can be, right? Like last year, we only had Darnell Mooney as our main receiver. Allen Robinson was like on and off the entire season. We had practically no good third option besides, Marquise Goodwin sometimes. So getting a number two, number one receiver too, if you don't view Mooney as a one, that'd be pretty important. Interior offensive line, Dylan Parham is a name. Zion Johnson as well. But I feel like Zion is going to be gone in the first round, according to the mock drafts that I've seen. So we'd be lucky if he falls. But if you go to the defense then, like you said, cornerback is obviously a need. Jalen is probably the only sure thing we have right now. But, Thomas Graham Jr., we'll see what happens with him. But there's a lot of good cornerbacks in this draft. So I could see, maybe us drafting a guy like Marcus Jones in the third round. I like him out of, where is he from? I forgot what college he's from, but he's
Houston?
a pretty Houston. Yeah. So Marcus Jones, maybe. Linebacker, I could also see us attacking because, again, we only really have Roquan and Nicholas Moreau. So, we need more linebackers in the scheme. So that could be pretty important. We got rid of Khalil Mack. So if you want another edge rusher too. So pretty much, like, I could see us going with any player that's really talented. Right now, it should be kind of a best player available approach. Aside from maybe the first couple of picks, because I still feel like we need to invest more in the offense because there's not really much proven things on the offense right now.
I get it. That's why I still think that the trading down's a big important option for the Bears, whether it's just one of their second round picks or maybe both of their second round picks, to get an extra third or fourth round because, they need all the picks that they have, which is not something that we, the Bears fans, are used to seeing because, Ryan Pace pretty much traded away a lot of picks and we ended up losing a lot of compensation picks as well because of the free agent signings. We have RIshab Skiri, who is the YouTuber with the Windy City, Chicago, and Usayd Koshul, who covers the Bears report for 24/7, joining us tonight to talk about the Bears. Both of you guys, I want to know how you guys kind of started your own career, and obviously our show began, with the Ken and myself. We're both being Asian Americans at a time when, our community is kind of somewhat of under attack during the pandemic and wanted to kind of amplify our voices. RIshab, you have a very popular YouTube show. Can you give us an idea of where you got your start and where you are right now?
Yeah, sure. So I've said the story a couple of times, but pretty much how it started was by accident. I never really intended to have a YouTube channel. Never really intended to like give my opinions on the Bears or whatnot. But I think it was like sophomore year of college, or it was freshman year of college, spring break. And I had like nothing going on that spring break. Like I wasn't going on vacation or anything. So I was just sitting at home kind of bored. And that was right after the 2018, signings that we made. And I was really hyped about like all the signings that we made. Right? Like we got Allen Robinson, who I was pretty excited about, Taylor Gabriel, Trey Burton at the time I was pretty excited about. We hired Matt Nagy, who was this new, we thought, innovative offensive mind. So I got so excited about that. So I was like, why not make a hype video to like hype this team up, just put together clips of my favorite moments of the team to kind of hype everybody up for the next season. And I posted on YouTube, not expecting anything to happen, but a few weeks later, I checked back, it has like almost 60,000 views. So I'm like, oh my God, I might have struck gold on this. So that's pretty much like how I started. I just started making more hype videos. Then when the season started, I doing like, reaction videos, prediction videos, just giving my opinion on the Bears. And I wouldn't consider myself like a media member. I'm kind of more just like a fan giving my opinions and, speaking on the Bears and whatnot. So right now the channel is going pretty good. I still make videos, reacting to what's going on in the Bears world and also making hype videos like you have on the screen right now. So
Sure.
Yeah.
Your Justin Fields video is the one that really got me really excited, and that's how I found out about you. And you've really been, producing high quality hype videos for the Bears fans to be really, really excited about, even in the down years. Usayd, I remember I reached out to you by Twitter. You were working with Patrick Sheldon, another Bears blogger, Twitter handle in the past. And can you explain where you kind of gotten started and how you ended up writing about the Bears?
Yeah, so I remember my senior year of high school, and this is going back to 2016. We had decided to do a sports journalism unit in the class. And, up until that point, I was kind of like any other fan, is I would kind of log on to ESPN and Bleacher Report and just read whatever was going on. And then my teacher kind of noticed that there was a artistic style to my writing, specifically about the Bears in sports journalism. And again, my family's been living in Chicago for like 15, 16 years now. So I kind of grew up watching the Bears too, but just through that, I graduated high school, and then all throughout 2016, I wasn't sure where to get started, but I always kind of looked and said, hey, is there something that I'm doing right now? I mean, is there a market out there for where I could start my own website? So I started at sportsblog.com, just networked, via Twitter, moved over to a couple different websites, kind of got my foot in the door in the Bears community through Bear Goggles On, which is at Fansided right now. I have to say I've met a lot of amazing people along the way, and then just kept being persistent, signed on with Bear Report January 2019, and then signed on with a couple podcast networks that no longer exist, and then went ahead and, through the connections at the podcast network, I landed at Empire Sports Media and Fireside Bears, which is another website that I do, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, all that kind of stuff just related to the Bears. So my journey hasn't been a traditional journey because I've only taken one journalism class in my entire life in high school. But, I just think that continuing to be persistent, networking, always wanting to go ahead and learn, it's kind of led me to where I am today. And I like to tell people it started out as a hobby, and now because I actually get compensated real well for doing this type of work, it's like a part-time job to me. I've been credentialed a couple times, but it's just been fun overall doing it.
That's great to hear. Now let's talk a little bit about the whole league as a general. As we all know, it's a 24/7 beat. Things keep going all the time. So let's talk a little bit about the league. As a Browns fan, I'm very disturbed about the Deshaun Watson trade. Of course, we don't know whether he is going to be playing this season because Roger Goodell still has to decide. And of course, the civil case still has to be decided against him. But where do you guys stand on the Watson trade to the Browns? I'll go with you.
Yeah,
go ahead. Go ahead, RIshab. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, it's obviously tough if you're a Browns fan because this guy is like a really talented quarterback, probably the most talented quarterback in entire history. But you have all these off the field stuff that you might not agree with, like having him be the quarterback of your team. So I've been seeing on Twitter like people debating both sides, and it's a really tough argument, tough discussion to have because most people just want to talk about football, but there's so much stuff that's bigger than football. So I really don't know. Like, there's obviously a ton of cases, so. We'll see what happens, but it's just a lot of baggage for the Browns too, right? Because they have to think about this the entire next season. And like Baker Mayfield's still on the roster too. So like I don't even know what happens with Baker Mayfield now, because like apparently nobody wants him, at least the price that you have to pay him. I think it's like 19 million or something like that. So I don't know, man. I salute to you for being a Browns fan, because it must be a really tough situation.
I have lost body parts to this going back to since they began. Man. So my kidneys have shut down. My liver has shut down. It's an awful thing. You said, what about the what's going on with the rest of the league? Where do you see this entire division, especially with Aaron Rodgers coming back and Minnesota they're dealing with a whole new management team as well?
Yeah, look, the entire division, I think, is a complete toss-up at this point. Now, you look at the Green Bay Packers, and we kind of have to start at the very top and just work our way down. You look at Green Bay, and okay, Aaron Rodgers is back, but then we also know the information that came out where Aaron Rodgers basically knew his best friend Davante Adams wasn't coming back, and what had happened is that he's like, I'm going to sign here anyway because I believe this is where I'm going to go ahead and get the most money. So I think for Aaron Rodgers coming back, this was more about money than it was anything. And, when you look at the Davante Adams trade here, I think Davante Adams is going into whatever his 8th or 9th year in the league. And at some point, I think as a player and just an employee, you in general kind of get tired of the way things are being run and coming up short year after year. And, we've all been there in life in our careers where it's like we're with a certain company and we don't like the direction that it's going. So we put our 2 weeks in, we move on. And Davante Adams, I think, got so tired of falling short year after year. He's like, you know what? Let me go ahead and play somewhere else where I'm going to have a legitimate chance at winning. And again, Derek Carr is his best friend. So ending up in Vegas, I'm not surprised. Now, you look at the Detroit Lions. Detroit's certainly interesting case because last offseason when they hired Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell as the GM and head coach, they signed them to 6-year deals. So they've still got 5 years remaining. And Detroit's really trying to do this the right way for the first time in forever. They traded for Jared Goff last offseason. They restructured his contract. So I think they've committed to him for another 2 to 3 seasons, knowing that they are going to build this roster up and hopefully have a solid foundation built for whenever a quarterback decides to be in their draft plans. Right. Detroit versus everybody. Thank you, Don. And then when I look at the Bears, I mean, I think what's happening is it's like we talked about. Ryan Poles is taking this extremely patient approach, but there's also this question that pops up is that if you're George McCaskey and you're basically the direct supervisor, you're the chairman, so you're basically Ryan Poles' supervisor at this point. Sure. Does your timeline for Poles and Eberflus get impacted now that they've put this plan into action, specifically knowing that there is a highly prized rookie quarterback that is on the roster? That's, I think, a legitimate question we have to ask. But, just looking at the rest of the league, it's very interesting because there's been a lot of, league shifting moves that have been made. You're talking Tyreek Hill, Russell Wilson, Davante Adams. So when we talk every year about the NFL's a year-to-year league, this year, though, it's a year-to-year league that is going to have a major impact on the league for the next few seasons.
And let's talk about where Jimmy Garoppolo may be headed. RIshab, any guesses on where he might be headed after the season he's had with San Francisco?
I think he's staying on the 49ers because, like, at this point in time, I don't even know who's going to trade for him, right? Because if you want to get a veteran quarterback, you probably already got yours in free agency, like the Steelers did. And if you want another one, like Baker Mayfield is still out there, and he's, in my opinion, he's a better quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo, even though he hasn't gotten to the places where Jimmy G has been. Jimmy G has been surrounded by, like, some great, great teams. So I think that it probably makes – because I know they want to start Trey Lance – but like as a backup, if you want to have Jimmy G as a backup, like that would be like one of the best backups in the NFL. So I guess it totally depends on like what Jimmy G, if he's okay with being a backup, if you absolutely can't find anything for Jimmy G, like I think he's just staying with the 49ers because like I can't think of a single team that would really need him desperately right now.
And you said we also have, of course, the old Bears quarterback, Mitchie Trubisky, going over to the Pittsburgh Steelers. How do you think he's going to do over there?
Honestly, the Steelers have had a couple disappointing years in a row now. They've made the playoffs, but they've had disappointing exits. They've kind of go ahead and they've limped to the playoffs a couple times too. But when you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, they're one of the few teams in the NFL that doesn't matter who's on the roster, they're just so well coached. So I think from that perspective, Mitch certainly ended up in a good situation. Now, I think last 2021 pretty much proved that a lot of us were probably more wrong than we're willing to admit, and that the real problem in Chicago wasn't Mitch Trubisky. It's just that Bears fans love to use the quarterback as the punching bag whenever things are going wrong. And it's the only fan base in sports that does this, by the way, that just blames the players and will give the coaches more slack than we're willing to admit. But, getting back to kind of Mitch here is that he's had a year to sit on the bench, kind of hone his skills. And that run first offense that they're going to run in Pittsburgh through Najee Harris is certainly going to play to Mitch Trubisky's strength. And ultimately, I still think that the way they structured the contract was basically hey, it's a 1-year deal and that's about it. Now, knowing that Tomlin and the GM Kevin Colbert are at all these pro days looking at these quarterbacks, I would not be surprised to see Pittsburgh draft a quarterback, knowing that they are going to get the most out of Mitch Trubisky and they can kind of afford to let a less talented QB, someone who's relatively inexperienced, like a Sam Howell, like a Malik Willis, like a Kenny Pickett, kind of just sit on the bench and for a year or two and marinate and take it all in before inserting that guy in as a long-term solution.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap it up. Usayd Koshul, Bears reporter with the Bears Report on 24/7, and RIshab Skiri, the Windy City production. Thank you so much for both of you. We both, at the Bears Barroom Network, we'd love to have you guys back on even before the season or during the season. This upcoming year, let's hope that the Bears will be in much better shape than what the Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace left us with, and hopefully the upcoming draft will offer some glimmer of hope. That they're heading in the right direction. Thank you guys for coming on short notice, and we look forward to having both of you guys again in the future.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you guys.
And that's pretty much going to wrap up the show for tonight. We thank you for watching us here on the Barroom Network. Stephen, quickly, of course, the NFL draft is coming up. What are your thoughts? And before we wrap up, what do you think about we heard from our guests on what we thought about the Bears' needs are. What do you think at this point of the Bears' most important needs?
Well, I pretty much think that what both guys are saying, this team has got a lot of holes. Only running back seem like a pretty good position as of right now. Ryan Poles have to build this team through the draft, and this draft will pretty much define, where the team is going, not just this year, but beyond that. We can't have any more screw ups where, we saw with Ryan Pace and the general managers before, a lot of first round picks or the top picks who didn't pan out. So we can't have that. We have to hit on those, 2 second round picks, whether they keep them or whether they trade them down for more picks. That's still to be debated. But a couple of weeks from now, we'll find out where the Bears are heading. And, I think a lot of us will be, nervously but also cautiously optimistic about the direction this team is heading right now.
Absolutely. And thank you, Cliff, for the good words. We'll definitely keep them coming. Our next show is going to be coming up in 2 weeks on April 18th. Due to work commitments, I will not be part of that show, but Stephen, you will still be here. So we'll have some interesting guests as well. Coming up next on the Barroom Network, it's Talking White Sox. Southburb Hitmen are all coming up. And of course, the White Sox are going to have an interesting season, as well as the Cubs as well. But Alyssa Bergamini is going to be the guest. She's going to be on Talking White Sox with Southburb Hitman coming up. I'm Ken. He's Steven. Have a good night. Thank you for joining us on the AA team, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, guys. Good night.